Shell is working hard to avoid and reduce the emissions of every liter of lubricant we make. Since 2016, we have reduced the carbon intensity of our lubricants manufacturing by over 30%. Over 50% of the electricity used on our blending plants now comes from renewable sources. We're going to keep improving, and while we do that, we're also going to offset our remaining emissions using Shell's nature-based solutions. Our customers have been very clear with us. They want great fuel efficiency with uncompromised engine performance and with the lowest possible impact on the climate. Today, we're delivering on that with the largest carbon neutral program in the lubricants industry.
Selamat siang, Pak Dianto.
Selamat siang, Pak. Halo, Pak.
Halo, Pak. Sehat ya, Pak?
Sehat, Pak. Sehat, Pak. Gimana, Pak? Sehat, Pak?
Puji Tuhan, Pak. Sehat, Pak.
Pak, kalau ada ininya, di-share juga, Pak, materinya.
Oh iya, nanti saya share.
Kemarin kita
Habis
nggak,
acara selesai.
kemarin kita
Kemarin
nggak
udah bukannya
dapat.
saya. Oh ya?
Iya.
Lupa saya. Nanti saya share deh. Tapi yang dari speaker lain dapat nggak, Pak?
Sudah semua ini.
Oh iya, oke. Kalau gitu saya kirim sekarang nih kalau gitu. Lewat WA aja ya, saya kirim ya.
Boleh, sudah di-link semua sih mereka nih.
Siap. Oke, tunggu sebentar.
Sudah terima, Pak.
Oke. Ini Pak Zaki, Pak, sebagai technical manager kami.
Oh, kita panggil Pak Zaki ya?
Iya.
Ya, Pak. Oke. Halo, Pak Zaki.
Sorry, saya masih mute tadi, Pak. Siang, Pak Dianto.
Siang, Pak.
Iya. Nanti saya.
Yang jadi ini apa namanya moderator hari ini Pak Hendra Sinadia, Pak.
Pak Hendra.
Gitu.
Pak Hendra kan anggota ini juga, Kadin, terus asosiasi Apindo, dan salah satu isu mereka itu adalah nikel.
Di IVECO sama siapa Pak hubungannya Pak? Chakra Jawara ini?
Di Sehari sih Pak.
Sehari.
Ya.
Karena dulu kan saya kan pernah kerja di Trakindo kan. Dulu manajernya IVECO waktu saya di Freeport itu saya kenal, namanya Pak Jumadi.
Ini Sehari sih yang tahu semuanya Pak.
Oke deh, kita tunggu ya Pak ya.
Siap.
Saya matiin dulu ya, oke.
Siap. Oh, masih 20 menit lagi ya. Oh iyalah. Ini biasanya sekarang peserta itu langsung masuk di 1 menit terakhir. Mungkin inilah banyak meeting ya.
Selamat siang Pak Adrian. Pak Adrian masih mute.
Selamat siang, Pak.
Ya, apa kabar Pak? Sehat?
Sehat, Pak. Sehat, Pak Ramli.
Alhamdulillah. Kelihatan nggak video saya?
Kelihatan, Pak.
Oh, saya nggak lihat ya. Di mana ya video saya? Galeri.
Loh, Pak Ramli sendiri nggak ngelihat?
Ya, udah.
Selamat siang Pak Ramli.
Ya, siang Pak. Bagaimana ya saya pronounce-nya?
Saya Christian Pak. Kalau
Pak
yang
Christian, ya?
Pak Sofwatu Zaki ini Bapak bisa panggil Pak Zaki aja Pak.
Pak Zaki.
Pak Zaki ya.
Jadi kami berdua
Oke.
dari Shell, saya sebagai marketing manager, Pak Zaki sebagai technical manager untuk PT Shell Indonesia Pak.
Oh, oke. Shell ya.
Pak Zaki masih mute kayaknya, nggak kedengeran.
Oke, siang Pak Ramli.
Kayaknya udah. Siap ya. Oke, thank you semua. Yes, gimana Mbak Desi?
Halo Pak Ramli, apa kabar?
Ya, selalu fresh, selalu cantik ya.
Thank you, Pak Ramli juga fresh terus, awet muda.
Ya, amin.
Selamat siang Pak Zaki.
Siang.
Saya pikir tadi dari mana bule gitu ya Pak.
Ini kurang bule ya Bu ya?
Iya. Bule timur ternyata.
Orang Rusia kali ya?
Iya.
Dia bule karena waktu kecil main layangan Pak.
Itu nggak ada nama depannya Pak Zaki atau gimana?
Ya, nama saya ya itu aja Bu, nggak ada depan, nggak ada belakangnya.
Oh,
Siap. Halo Pak Hendra.
Hey, halo. Selamat siang, Bu Desi.
Selamat siang.
Wah, ada Pak Kris ya.
Halo Pak.
Halo Pak Kris, Pak. Nah ini Pak Sof.
Pak Zaki Pak
Panggilannya
panggilnya
siapa?
Pak.
Pak Zaki Pak.
Pak Zaki ya?
Iya,
Oh iya. Pak Zaki.
Suara Pak ini kok bergema ya, Pak?
Siapa?
Atau punya saya yang bergema?
Saya dengarnya bergema, Pak Adianto bergema nih.
Tes. Masih bergema nggak, Pak? Oh, sekarang udah nggak. Masih
Masih ya?
Kok bisa
Suara
bergema?
saya gimana? Bergema nggak Pak Adianto?
Bergema, Pak. Atau saya sendiri atau gimana? Bu Desi, bergema nggak?
Enggak sih Pak.
Oh. Pak Hendra pakai 2 channel nggak Pak?
Enggak.
Atau dari handphone Pak? Enggak kan?
Enggak.
Enggak ya.
Kok bergema ya? Saya coba keluar dulu kali ya. Pak.
Halo, tes. Ini nggak bergema?
Enggak.
Pak Ramli nggak bergema ya?
Enggak.
Iya ini.
Di saya oke-oke aja tuh.
Ya.
Nah, coba. Halo Pak Hendra.
Ya, halo.
Tes Pak.
Gimana?
Udah bagus Pak. Udah bagus.
Oke. Pak Ramli, selamat siang Pak Ramli.
Halo.
Siang Pak Indra. How are you?
Oh,
Good to see you.
Fine, thanks. Good to see you again. I've back to Singapore,
Semua muka fresh.
Pak Ramli.
Belum Pak, udah setahun lebih nggak pulang dari Maret lalu.
Wow.
Masih registration. Coba yang
Udah kayak
itu yang
second home.
A-nya panjang nggak Bu? Hello.
Hello.
Okay. So we already have Miss Ling Ying from China.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.
What time is it now in China, Miss?
Okay, can I do?
Halo Ibu Eka Sari Susiana.
Halo Pak.
Oh, sudah bisa ya Bu ya?
Udah bisa.
Saya buat full name-nya atau itu saja?
Iya, itu aja.
Oh ya, oke Bu. Berarti kita masih menunggu 2 pembicara lagi ya.
Selamat siang Ibu Susiana.
Selamat siang Pak.
Selamat siang Bu Susiana.
Selamat siang Pak.
Salam kenal.
Salam kenal juga Pak.
Pak Krisna ya, biasa ya Pak?
Iya, betul.
Oke ya, kakak ya.
Iya.
Beliau masih di Singapura ya?
Masih. Aku kebetulan lagi kuarantin di Jakarta Pak.
Oh, salam buat Pak Krisna ya. Dulu
Iya,
kita
Pak.
pernah buat acara dengan Oliver Wyman waktu APBI ya, 2 tahun lalu kalau nggak salah ya. 2 atau 3 tahun yang lalu.
Kebetulan dia lagi off hari ini dan makanya nggak bisa join.
Oh, oke.
Iya.
Nih, Bu Ling Ying.
Hello, everyone.
Ya, Pak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi Pak, yeah, Mas. Yes Pak, Nikhil. Thank you Pak.
How are you doing?
I'm fine Pak. Thank you Pak for joining Pak. So you are now in India, right Pak?
No, I'm in London.
In London. Oh, what time is it now there, Pak?
I'm based in London actually. So yeah, it's it's our office in London, CIU office in London.
Nice to meet you, Mr. Nickel Shah. I am Christian from Shell Indonesia. How do you do?
So just to be clear, am I going to be sharing my screen for the presentation? Is that right?
Yes, Pak. Yeah, sorry, you wanna present it, or we share screen from here, Pak?
No, I think it'd be easy if I share my screen. I was thinking, because then or is that not going to be possible?
Okay, Pak. Noted, Pak.
Is that okay to share my screen and then go through the presentation?
Yes, Pak.
Okay, so I'll share my screen once we are ready to start.
Okay, Pak. We start at 2 o'clock exactly, Pak.
Okay,
so we still wait for Pak Christopher. One speaker, Pak Christopher.
Siang Pak Priyadi. Mohon maaf, saya status cuti nih, ada acara lain.
Selamat siang, good afternoon everyone.
Halo, good afternoon.
Halo Pak Chris.
Mr. Christopher Gower.
Good afternoon.
Thank you Pak Chris. So we have two Pak Chris ya, Pak Christian and Pak Christopher.
Nice to meet you, Pak Christopher. This is Christian from Shell Indonesia.
Nice to meet you, Pak Christian.
Pak Christopher, are you in Jakarta, Pak?
I am, yes.
Okay, Pak.
Yes, sitting in my home in Pondok Indah.
It's quite close with my office right now, Pak Christopher. I'm in Talavera office near the Citos,
All right,
Square.
Okay. I'm still finding my way around. I only arrived in Indonesia about 6 weeks ago, so
Oh.
so I moved here. So.
So, what is your original country, actually, Mr. Christopher?
UK.
Oh, UK. Okay.
Hi, Christopher. This is Nikhil Shah calling from CRU in London.
Oh, hi, Nikhil. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Good. I can tell you I'm a bit warmer than you are.
Oh, yeah. It's well, we went for a bit of a cold snap actually of the last few days, and it's funny. I think this is the volatility on the weather has been everywhere. I think last week we were having joined 22 degrees for 1 or 2 days, and then it suddenly dipped to, and it was snowing like on Sunday a bit, and so yeah, the weather's been pretty volatile, a bit like the nickel price, but but yeah, it's been pretty volatile to be honest.
The April showers, isn't it? Not April snow.
Well, exactly, and well, surprisingly, it's April so far. We haven't had as much rain as normally. Easter weekend, you typically have the rains and so on, and you sort of stuck at home watching the James Bond movie or something. But now this time around, it's just been cold, but not much rain. So yeah. So you're based in Jakarta, are you?
Yes. I moved here last end of February. I moved here.
Oh right, okay. Oh, that's nice.
Oh, it was very nice coming to a city where the bars were open.
Right. Yes. No. Well, we have the lockdown easing from Monday further, but yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty on this still at the moment, and in terms of how this sort of plays out. I think with the variants and and how the vaccine rollout is it's different in terms of where different countries are at the moment. So yeah, it's still a lot of uncertainty, I think, at the moment in terms of how this plays out.
Oke, Pak Hendra.
Ya, Pak Adianto.
Pak Desi udah ya, kita sudah tepat waktu ya. Okay, so. Actually, we are still have Oke, Pak. Thank you. It is 2 o'clock right now. Actually, we have 400 registered participants for this webinar. So I think we can run as scheduled while waiting for other participants to join. Is it okay, Pak? All speakers, Pak Chris?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you, Bu Desi. Please open the webinar. Suaranya masih di mute.
Thank you, Pak Adianto. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope all of you are doing great today. I am Desi from Petromindo, and I would like to welcome you all to webinar series 2021 Indonesian Nickel Industry Investing in Sustainable Nickel Projects. As you know, last week was the first series of this webinar, and we already discussed about Indonesian nickel and smelter outlook. And today is the second series, which the main topic is about global nickel outlook. And I'm sure we're gonna have a very interesting discussion today. This webinar is proudly hosted by Coal and Mineral Asia Magazine, Petromindo, and PT Indonesia Komoditas Index. And we are honored because of the enthusiastic we got. We received around 400 participants registered to this event. Well, obviously, nickel is one of the most interesting subjects to be discussed. All right, I would like to give a warm welcome to all speakers and panelists who will join us today. Please welcome the first speaker, Mr. Nikhil Shah, Principal Analyst of CRU Group. Good afternoon, Mr. Shah.
Hi everyone.
Hi, yes. You're joining from London, right?
Yes, I'm joining from London today. Yes.
Thank you very much for your time.
No,
And
it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. And our next speaker is Ms. Lingying Zhang, Major Nickel Market Analyst at Shanghai Metals Market, Non-Ferrous Apartment. Good afternoon, Ms. Lingying.
Good afternoon.
And may I know you're joining from Beijing or Shanghai?
Shanghai.
Oh, Shanghai. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. And let's welcome our third speaker, Bapak Shof Watuzaki. Selamat siang, Pak Zaki.
Siang, Ibu Desi.
Yeah, Pak Zaki is the Lubricant Technical Manager of Shell Indonesia. Thank you very much, Pak Zaki, for your time.
Okay, thank you.
And let's welcome our next speaker, Mr. Christopher Gower, CEO of Altalium Group. Good afternoon, Mr. Gower. Pak Christopher, hello.
Still mute, Pak.
It helps to unmute one's microphone if one is going to speak. So good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And let's welcome our next speaker, Ibu Susiana Ekasari, Associate Energy and Utilities at Oliver Wyman. Selamat siang, Ibu Susiana atau Ibu Eka ini?
Ibu Eka.
Oh, Ibu Eka. Terima kasih, Ibu Eka sudah bergabung.
Sama-sama.
And we also would like to welcome next speaker, Bapak Ramli Ahmad, Director at PT Firema Inpex. Selamat siang, Pak Ramli.
Good Desi. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us, Pak Ramli. And I would like to welcome also to our moderator, Bapak Hendra Sinadia, representative of the Energy and Mineral Resources Company Indonesian Employers Association or APindo. Good afternoon, Pak Hendra.
Hello, good afternoon, Bu Desi. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Pak Hendra, for your time. And on behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to take a moment to give a sincere appreciation to our wonderful partners and sponsors. Please give a warm applause to our main sponsor, PT Shell Indonesia. Thank you very much, PT Shell Indonesia, for the support and trust in our work. And thank you very much also to our partner sponsor, PT Chakra Jawara IVECO.
Shell is working hard to avoid and reduce the emissions of every liter of lubricant we make. Since 2016, we have reduced the carbon intensity of our lubricants manufacturing by over 30%. Over 50% of the electricity used on our blending plants now comes from renewable sources. We're going to keep improving, and while we do that, we're also going to offset our remaining emissions using Shell's nature-based solutions. Our customers have been very clear with us. They want great fuel efficiency with uncompromised engine performance and with the lowest possible impact on the climate. Today we're delivering on that with the largest carbon neutral program in the lubricants industry.
Yes, thank you very much, Shell Indonesia, for your great contribution on this webinar. All right, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants, if you have any question during this webinar, please type your questions in Q&A tab, and we will try to answer your questions on Q&A session later. Or during the Q&A session, you may click raise hand, and we will activate your microphone so you can directly ask your question to the speaker. Okay, so without further ado, I now give the virtual floor to Pak Hendra Sinadia. Please, Pak Hendra.
Okay, thank you, Bu Desi. Good afternoon, all the panelists, sponsors, participants of the webinar series 2021 Indonesian Nickel Industry Outlook with the topic Global Nickel Output and Challenges. My name is Hendra Sinadia. I am most people know me as a executive director of the Indonesian Coal Mining Associations, but yeah, beside coal, of course, Indonesia has nickel as the one of the most talked about community in the mining sector. And beside the Indonesian Coal Mining Association, I came to follow up the issue on other communities in Indonesia, and I'm also part of the member of Indonesian Employer Associations or APindo. So before we start, a little bit introduction of the APindo. APindo is founded in 1952, and many people widely recognize APindo as the Indonesian sole representative of the industrial policies, relations policy in Indonesia. But since 2014, APindo, under the leadership of Mr. Haryadi Sukamdhani, it set up a committee on energy and mineral resources. APindo plays major roles in many Indonesians' business and investment reforms. Among others is tax amnesty, also the tax reform in Indonesia, and also the latest one is an omnibus law of our Indonesians' job creation law. APindo play a very significant role in boosting the investment climate in Indonesia. So energy and mineral resources, including nickel, is a very important part of the APindo all the organizations, and we can also to support the development of the investment climate in nickel industry. So, okay, talking about nickel, yeah, Bu Desi, the host is just mentioned that is a very exciting and talk about community now, and almost many people talk about nickel. Suddenly, the name of Tesla or Elon Musk has been the household name in Indonesia since a few months ago. And this morning, I watched next interview of President Joko Widodo in Bloomberg TV, whereby President Joko Widodo also mentioned about the opportunity for foreign investors to invest in an exciting nickel market in Indonesia, where Indonesian is keen to pursue as a major players in supplier of lithium battery, which is key component of the electric vehicle. So that's the today development of the growing nickel industry. But despite the uncertainty, talking about the COVID-19 since last year until now, by the coronavirus pandemic, nickel rebounded relatively sharply this year. If we look at the Q1 performance, Q1 low and seen after the COVID-19 related lockdown measures, many analysts see that the nickel was able to rise from the COVID-19 impact despite the markets being in oversupply condition. So the positive sentiment in the nickel price, it's boosted also around the use of a nickel in EV batteries. And although demand in the EV batteries relatively lags behind of the demand from steel industry, and even at the moment the rise of nickel price is attributed to the growing steel demand, and also the use of stainless steel, which is by far is the largest single segment use of nickel. So demand of nickel price also is boosted by growing demand from steel industry in China, which we will listen presentation from one of the speakers today, and also the demand from China is highly closely tied with the growing economic recovery of the second world biggest economy in the world. And then also the demand, the price boosted by the supply concern, the shortage, after the Indonesian government imposed the ore export ban, and also the limitation of the supply from the Philippines, and also the adverse weather impact. So demand is expected to recover in 2021 with, of course, the growing economic conditions, and it's boosted by the vaccine rollout across the world, and lockdown measures used to slow down, but I heard in some European countries, including England and as part of Spain and France, they imposed a partial lockdown due to the second or third wave of the COVID-19. But with the rise of the speed of vaccine rollout, we are very optimistic that the economic recovery in Europe and also in the Asia Pacific will go, and this will likely to boost the commodity. So this afternoon we have a great lineup of speakers. Bu Desi has mentioned we have several very competent speakers in the today webinar, and the first speakers is we'd like to introduce Mr. Nickel Shah. Nickel Shah is a principal analyst at CRU. CRU is a leading community market analysis firm. Nikhil joined the firm since 1995 as a master degree from business economics from London University. He is also responsible for CRU nickel research and author of an editor of the Nickel Monitor and the Nickel Market Outlook. He also contributes to other area of the team, including nickel cost and stainless steel. Okay, without further ado, Mr. Nickel Shah, your presentation with the topic overview of global nickel supply and demand outlook. 15 minutes, the time given by the committee. Okay, please, Mr. Nickel Shah, joining us from London.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. I was asking your colleague, am I sharing my screen or are you showing the presentation?
I think you can show your screen.
Okay, I'll just share my screen. Sorry, just hold on. Just trying to I'm just trying to, sorry.
Okay, you got it?
I'm having problems on this side, hold on.
We can share from here, Pak.
Or yeah, why don't you, Pak Adianto, sharing the screen of Mr. Shah presentations?
Okay, Pak. We share from here, Pak, ya?
Can you see my screen now?
Not yet.
Now?
Yes,
okay,
Pak.
It works.
Okay, cool. All right. Sorry about that. My apologies. So once again, thank you for the introduction. I'd like to start by thanking the conference organizers for inviting me to present at this webinar, and I'm very happy about that. The topic I was given was to look at the global nickel and supply and demand balance, and in particular the prospects for 2021, given given the COVID-19 pandemic. I'll start by looking at sort of recent price developments and then move on to look at the fundamentals in terms of both demand and supply. Now, in terms of pricing, I mean, it's been another sort of volatile period for the nickel price. We saw prices rally from the lows in March, April, at the height of COVID-19 to, above $20,000 a ton, sort of February time. Now, the rally came on the back of a number of factors. In particular, although the macro picture in terms of the fundamentals were showing an improvement, especially with the recovery in stainless production in China and then outside of China, I think there were other factors which aided the rise or the rally in the price. And we had, of course, stimulus measures being announced across many of the global economies. And many of these stimulus measures were focused on a greener economy. And I think with the EV sector, we saw a lot of investors coming into the market on the back of that as well. We had the weaker US dollar also helping to lift prices as well. But given the fundamental picture, we were concerned that prices had overstretched fundamental levels. And more recently, I think the trigger for the price correction, although it's mild in a sense, was the announcement by Tsingshan that it plans to utilize part of its nickel pig iron capacity in Indonesia to produce nickel matte. So Tsingshan has agreed to supply around 100,000 tons of nickel matte over a 1-year period starting from October. The reason why this undermined market sentiment was mainly because, the battery sector, as you see in a slide later in my presentation, is going to play an important role in nickel demand over the medium longer term. And there was a concern that potentially there was a bottleneck in terms of class 1 supply to meet this increasing demand from the battery sector. Now, with the news from Tsingshan, potentially means that we don't have this sort of bottleneck potentially to meet nickel demand from the battery sector. And I think this led to investors liquidating their long positions. And you can see that with the LME commitment of trade reports data. You can see the yellow shaded area and how that's come off with the liquidation we saw from investors, and in turn, the nickel price coming off from its highs to around 16,000. It's been trading around that level for a month now. We have seen prices rise lately to, I think this morning, around 16,800. Once again, the potential for additional stimulus and strong demand across many of the key consuming economies. Now, as I said, we have seen a strong recovery on the stainless side. The chart on the left shows the change in stainless production. And you can see that with the impact of COVID in Q1 last year, you can see how we saw Chinese stainless production drop significantly. And in Q2, we saw a very strong rebound. Now, outside of China, we're basically a quarter behind. And you can see how ex-China stainless production was impacted in the second quarter of last year. And we have seen a strong rebound since then. In fact, global stainless production in Q1 is now above pre-COVID levels due to the rebound we've seen both in China, initially, in Indonesia as well, and of course, outside of China, Indonesia, in terms of Europe and North America. Now, if you look at the regional change, you can see last year, outside of China, Indonesia, global stainless production fell in many of the countries. China, we think stainless production was flat on a year-on-year basis. This is a very good, given that at the height of COVID, we were expecting Chinese stainless production to fall by around 6 to 7%. In Indonesia, we saw stainless production rise strongly by 13%. And this year, as you can see, we're expecting global stainless production to rise by over 13% with a recovery across the board. We're looking at strong production growth once again in China and Indonesia. Indonesia, we're looking at a very strong rebound. Tsingshan, there are two main players on the Indonesian stainless side. You have Tsingshan and Virtue Dragon. And a lot of the increase in over the last 12 months has come from Virtue Dragon, which started up early last year. Virtue Dragon has around 2.5 million tons of stainless capacity, and Tsingshan has around 3 million tons of stainless capacity. A lot of this material is being exported, to China, especially in the recent months. We've seen, I think, China, has an exemption on billet imports from Indonesia, and we've seen a lot of billet exports from Indonesia to China. As I said, elsewhere, we have seen a strong recovery in Europe, in America. And I think, part of this is also because with COVID-19, we have seen a shift in expenditure from services to goods. And so demand for domestic appliances, for example, is very good. And this in turn has seen strong exports from China during the lockdown periods we had in Europe and America. Now, the other sector where we're seeing strong demand or recovery is from the EV sector. The two main stars of the EV sector last year were China and Europe. In China, we've had a strong start to NEV sales. NEV sales for January to February are up nearly 400%. Of course, it's a sort of a base effect given the numbers were much lower this time last year with the impact of COVID. But nonetheless, we are expecting Chinese NEV sales to add around 1.85 million units this year. In Europe, we have seen a strong EV sales picture. This has been mainly due to subsidies which came into effect, especially in the middle part of last year, with Germany, France, and the UK providing subsidies to boost EV, or support the EV sector. Of course, there is a question mark over what happens if these subsidies are removed and whether we would see some sort of slowdown. But at the moment, we are expecting strong EV sales in Europe and China this year. Now, in terms of what this means for overall consumption, you can see last year we had a decline in nickel consumption by around 2.5% due to COVID. In fact, you can see that the demand from stainless is actually flat, despite global stainless falling by around 5%. And this reflects the fact that we had strong growth in Indonesia and China, where predominantly 300 series production was grew, and that's more nickel intensive. And of course, in these two countries, there's a greater usage of primary nickel units compared to Europe and the US. Now, this year, we're expecting nickel demand to rise by around 12% on the back of, as I mentioned earlier, strong rebound in stainless and increasing demand from the EV sector. Now, as part of our nickel coverage, we do a sort of look at the medium and longer term picture. We do provide a detailed supply-demand balance of a 5-year period. And, if we look at sort of the medium-term picture, you can see how important nickel demand from the battery sector is. You can see that over the next 5 years, demand from the battery and the stainless sector in terms of volume terms is similar in magnitude. And that illustrates the increasing EV penetration we're going to see. And of course, the increasing use of nickel-intensive batteries as the industry moves towards, from at the moment 622, 533 chemistry towards using more of a 811 chemistry. So that's going to support nickel demand in batteries over the next couple of years as well. Now, if we turn to the supply side, Indonesia really is the focus of nickel supply. If you look at the picture last year, COVID-19, unlike some of the other base metals, we did not see a big impact on nickel supply. In fact, nickel supply grew by around 45% last year. And here, the chart on the left shows the contribution to supply, and you can see the main supply growth came from Indonesian nickel pig iron production, where we saw continued addition of new capacity. And this is not surprising when you consider the cost advantage of producing NPI in Indonesia compared to, say, China, given the Indonesian ore ban came into effect at the start of last year. So the cost of Indonesian NPI is below $8,000 a ton, and that makes it very attractive to build capacity in Indonesia. Outside of Indonesia, we saw Chinese NPI decline last year. The main reason for that was, of course, the introduction of the ore ban, leaving the Philippines the main supplier to the Chinese NPI sector. And we also saw sort of ex-NPI production sort of decline last year as well. We saw some disruptions due to COVID in Q2, but many of the operations returned to normal production by sort of in the later part of last year. And Batavi, which was also impacted, has just recently restarted. So we should see some sort of supply recovery in terms of ex-NPI. Now, with this growth in nickel pig iron production last year, we saw increasing supply of class 2 material, and this led to undermine the pricing for class 2 material. So here we show the Mpi price versus the Lme Nickel Price. And you can see how the discount for NPI was as high as over $3,000. You can see in sort of December to February period. Now, with the discount last year, we have seen increasing discounts for ferronickel. At the moment, we hear ferronickel discounts range between $1,500 to $2,000 a ton. So this reflects the increasing supply of class 2 to the stainless sector, which in turn means that the use of class 1 in stainless has been declining, especially in China.
Mr. Shah, your time is, you have 3 minutes more.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll quickly rush through this. Now, as I said, Indonesia has been the main supply growth, driven by Tsingshan, Virtue Dragon, and Vida Bay. And we expect Indonesia NPI to rise to above 900,000 tons this year. Now, the other area of growth is, of course, HPAL. And I think these projects are important given that this material is required for increasing demand from the battery sector. But of course, we have seen historically how projects have suffered from cost overruns and have faced delays. I think this is an important factor to bear in mind when considering the risks surrounding the new HPAL capacity. The other issue, of course, is with the conversion of NPI to matte is the carbon footprint. I think that's going to be interesting, given that a lot of the NPI capacity is based on coal-based power. But of course, Tsingshan has announced plans to invest in significant renewable power capacity over the next couple of years, and that's going to be interesting to watch as well. In terms of nickel sulfate prices, we are seeing a big premium for nickel sulfate at over $3,000 a ton, reflecting the strong demand from the EV sector. And this in turn means that the demand for briquettes is very high. And we've seen very high premiums for nickel briquettes, especially in China. So to summarize, I know we're very short of time. We do expect overall the nickel market to remain in surplus. We have a surplus last year of around 140,000 tons. We expect a surplus this year to be around 50,000 tons. And at the moment, I mean, given the demand is strong for Q2 seasonally as well, I think in the second half, we do expect prices to ease from these sort of current levels. Because this year, we're expecting the nickel price to average around $16,000 a ton. So I'll end my presentation, and I look forward to any questions we have later on.
Okay, thank you, Nikhil. It's a very informative and comprehensive information. Sorry, the time is very limited, but we believe that there are a lot of information, very important for the participants to a little bit to get the the overview of the global nickel demand and outlook for the 2021. We'll get back to you later in the Q&A sessions.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we move to the second presenter of the today webinar. Second presenter, it's Mr. Xia mentioned about the Chinese IVECO, the announcement from Xinghan of the import from Indonesia, and the price is the nickel price is largely influenced or determined by the import from China, and we saw the Indonesians export ban of concentrate raw material has affected the demand and the market. And this presenter, the next presenter, we're going to listen the topic overview of China NPI productions and market in 2021, how China economic recovery impact on the future of nickel price, is to be presented by Ms. Lingying Zhang. She's a major nickel market analyst at SMM, Shanghai Metals Market Non-Ferrous Department. SMM is China's leading integrated internet platform provider of non-ferrous and ferrous metal. SMM provide integrated internet platform benchmark prices, analysis, consulting conference, and the company has headquarters in Shanghai and also offices in Shandong and Guangdong provinces. Okay, without further ado, Ms. Lingying Zhang, time is yours. It's 15 minutes also. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
We can hear you.
Thanks for the invitation.
Hello. Are you going to share screen of your presentation?
Yeah, I'll show my screen. Wait a moment.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here for the presentation. And first, I introduce myself. I'm Lme Zhang, analyzer of Lme Nickel Price. Today, I will talk about our views on the topic of overview of China and production and the market in 2021. How the China economic impact on the nickel price? Through a few data. Here's a look at the raw material supply of Mpi. From the figure, we can see that since Indonesia banned the export of the laterite nickel ore, the supply of laterite nickel ore in China was at a reduction. In 2020, China's total import laterite nickel is about 53 million wet tons, including 44 million nickel from the Philippines and 4 million wet tons from Indonesia. It's estimated that China's total import of laminate nickel ore is about 56 million wet tons in 2021, of which 20.9% of the laterite nickel ore is provided by the Philippines, and the rest by New Caledonia, Turkey, or so on. The right figures show the situation of China's import laterite nickel ore by grade. The high-grade nickel ore in the Philippines was exhausted, so only the low and the medium-grade nickel ore were exported to China in 2020. In this case, that the import volume is vastly equal. The reduction of the grade of the imported nickel ore directly results in the decline of the imported metal volume directly. So, without Indonesia, the largest nickel ore import source, China nickel ore port inventory had a continuous declination in 2020. So far, it has reached 5.7 million wet tons, which is a low position in history. The tension of the nickel ore also led to the sharp rise of the nickel ore price in 2020. The price of 1.5% grade nickel ore increased from $33 per ton at the beginning of the year to at $2.5 per wet ton, an increase of 135.7%. The price of the domestic high MPI was rising along nickel ore price, but the increasing supply also limited the rise of MPI, so the price was difficult to maintain high price. It's mentioned that the supply of nickel ore was in short supply in 2020, and it will continue in 2021. The output of MPI can be estimated by the expectation of nickel ore import. In 2021, MPI output in China is estimated to about 400,000 nickel tons, of which high MPI output is about 330,000 nickel tons, and the low-grade MPI is about 80,000 nickel tons. Output of MPI in Indonesia had successfully surpassed China's in 2020, and being the first largest producer of MPI in 2021. It's expected that output of MPI in Indonesia will reach 900,000 nickel tons, and the trend that China's MPI production is gradually replaced by Indonesia's is ongoing. Above, we have admitted China's MPI output according to their supply of ore, and Indonesia's MPI output according to the production schedule. This figure shows the demand of 300 series stainless steel for the high MPI. Here, we only look at the downstream demand of high MPI because the market circulation of the low-grade MPI is very small, more than 75% of which are used by the integrated stainless steel plant. It's estimated that China's 300 series stainless steel production will reach 16 million tons in 2021, and Indonesia's will reach 4.5 million tons. This comprehensive growth rate of 300 series stainless steel in China and Indonesia will be 15.8%, and the comprehensive growth rate of high MPI in China and Indonesia will be 19.6%. We have calculated the supply and demand of high MPI in China and Indonesia. As shown in the table below, in 2021, the total supply of high MPI is about 1.22 million tons, and the total demand is about 1.19 million tons. The supply slightly exceeds the demand, or we can say it's basically in the state of the supply and demand balance. We have shown you that the supply and demand of 2021 MPI in China and Indonesia. We can analyze whether the nickel prices still be affected by the industry trend of MPI and the stainless steel. From the left figure, we can see that the trend of Mpi price and nickel price were relatively higher. It's correlated before 2020, and the correlation was weak in 2020. And the price premium of nickel for Mpi was also gradually increased, which is close to the maximum 300 yen per nickel point. Let's look at the right figure. The correlation between nickel and the new energy index before 2020, the new energy market has low heat, and the concept of high nickel battery has not been popularized. The new engine had a small driver nickel. However, since 2020, the price of nickel was consistent with the new energy index. The focus of the market deal with changed from the line of the Mpi and the stainless steel to the line of the nickel sulfate and ternary battery.
Ishang, you have 3 minutes left. Thank you.
Okay. Now, why the nickel price was expected to be so high? The main reason for our analysis is that in case of a rapid expansion of the new energy market, the supply of intermediate products, raw materials of nickel sulfate is in shortage. The briquette are used as an alternative of intermediate products which create nickel demand and boost the nickel price. We also know that Tsingshan announced their high nickel made project in May 2021. As soon as the news come out, the nickel price for limit for 2 days. Because the high nickel made is expected to make up for the shortage of intermediate supplies of nickel sulfate raw materials. The expected high consumption of nickel briquette eliminate and the nickel price fell sharply. So as for the judgment of the short-term nickel price, SM thinks that after guessing the high nickel matte production expectation, the nickel market will still take the road of the substituting nickel briquettes for the intermediate MHP in 2021, with the increase of a nickel briquette autolysis production line. Nickel briquette is gradually removed from the storage, and the nickel price will slowly fill the gap. The possibility of return to the high level at the beginning of the year is very low, and the operating range of the SHEF nickel in the second quarter may be 120,000 to 132,000 yuan per nickel ton. The operating range of the Lme Nickel is about 30,000 to $70,500 per ton. Okay, there are some views. There are some SM's views on nickel PGR market and the nickel price. Welcome to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lingying Sang, for the presentations, and it's very informative. And we'll get back to you later in the Q&A sessions. I don't need to summarize the presentation, but there are some key information that's very interesting to be discussed in the Q&A sessions. Thank you very much, Ms. Lingying Sang from Shanghai Metal.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the next presenter, before we introduce the next presenters, I'd like to inform to all the participants, if you have any questions to all the panelists, you can address to the column in the column chat, and then for all panelists, feel free, you can respond it directly to the chat column. Okay, there are a couple of questions I've already addressed by the participant to the panelists. Okay, the next presenter is from PT Shell Indonesia, the sponsors, Mr. Syo Watuzaki atau Pak Zaki ya, is the Lubricant and Technical Manager of PT Shell Indonesia. As you know that PT Shell Indonesia is a leading lubricant provider in Indonesia. Through Shell Lubricant Solutions, Shell's not only providing quality lubricant products, but also providing innovative services for machinery and maintenance. So this is very important, I believe, for all the nickel players, that having the good maintenance on the machinery is very key in keeping up with the growing demand of the nickel sector. So Pak Zaki with the presentations topic of Shell Lubricant Solution for Industrial and Maintenance Challenge, I think is very interesting. So Pak Zaki, the time is yours. It's 15 minutes also. Silakan Pak Zaki.
Thank you, Pak Hendra. Thank you for Kamati for this opportunity. I will present a bit about the challenge for industrial maintenance, including the nickel industry. I will share my screen. Please let me know if you have already seen my screen.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, let me see first. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So I will present a bit about the common challenges that faced by industrial maintenance, including nickel industry, and how Shell develop the solution to overcome those challenges. Yeah. At this moment, as we see that most of industries have the common challenges. Yeah, they have to be more productive with higher efficiency and also lower the carbon emission. So the challenges is not only about the economic or commercial, but the challenges also came from environmental challenges. Yeah. On the other hand, in terms of mechanical or maintenance challenges, yeah, reliability of equipment is a key factor to ensure that the continuity of the operation in the field. Yeah. So these challenges have been addressed by the equipment manufacturer, or we could say OEMs. Yeah. And in this presentation, I take a specific case from industrial gearboxes, where by taking the advantage of advanced metallurgy and manufacturing method, the design of industrial gearboxes are getting smaller with the same power transmitted. Means that the gearbox load are now become harder than before. And it also impacted to the lubricants, where the oil stress are becoming more higher and higher. That's why if we see that industrial standard body creates specific requirement for industrial gearboxes. If we see the geographical mapping of the gear oil industrial standard, it reflects to the geographical distribution of major industrial gearbox OEM. Yeah, we see that they are concentrated in Houston. We see there's North, Falk, Boston, and also in Europe we see Siemens Flender, and in Asia we can see in Japan and also in China. So due to the rapid development of gearbox, major OEMs are now more depend on their own internal lubricant standard and approval rather than relying on industrial oil standard. And Shell, we have 4 lubricant technology center that geographically mirroring to the spread of major OEMs. This enable or this allowing us to have some kind of collaboration or partnership with OEMs. The type of partnership can be in the form of Shell producing or Shell developing solution or products that meeting the OEM standards, or Shell develop the solution and testing method that can be adopted by the OEMs, or Shell do the co-development with OEM, where the intellectual properties of the hardware is belong to the OEMs, while intellectual properties of the lubricants belong to Shell. Yeah. I will take a couple of examples on how Shell developed the solution for specific challenges. One example, if we talk about energy efficiency challenges, we see that from the design of the gearboxes, yeah, there are the oil properties that can be contributed to the energy losses. Yeah. The first one is frictional losses, and the second one is churning losses due to thick oil viscosity. Yeah. So by reducing the friction of losses, the temperature of the oil will be also reduced, and it allow us to use more thinner oil or low viscosity oil. So it will also reduce the churning losses. So by design, if we can produce or we can develop oil that have low frictional losses, then we can reduce the energy losses. Yeah. So we do develop the formulation, and we test it in a screener test before actually test it in the rig test, because rig test is sometimes take a long time to test, and also a high cost. So to manage the cost, every formulation that will be undergo the rig test have to be pass the screeners test, so we can manage the development costs. And we also, after development, we also demonstrate this value to in the field. Yeah, this is one of example in one of mineral processing plant in Australia, where by using a synthetic Omala S4 gear oil, they can reduce the electricity consumption by about 2.1%, and also doubling the oil drain interval. So they also can reduce the disposal cost of the lubricant. So in total, in a year, they can have a saving over about 74,000 USD. Yeah. Another example is how to increase unit reliability. So first of all, we do some kind of computer modeling about the contact in the gears, and then we develop the formulation that can cope with the contact patterns, and then we do screener test, and also after they pass the screener test, we do the rig testing and also field testing to the formulation. Yeah, after we develop this formulation, then we can apply this with the application at the customer side. Yeah, so this is one example from one of mining operation in Indonesia, where they operate about 95 electric mining trucks. Yeah, they have final drive gearboxes that has a problem with their downtime. Yeah, because of component wear, and after they are using our synthetic Omala S4 GXV, and also improvement on some maintenance practices, they can reduce the component wear, and by reducing the component wear, they can reduce the downtime by half, and they can save about 115,000 US dollar per year from the increase the unit productivity. Yeah, so that's how Shell developed the solution for the specific challenges in industry. Yeah? So we define the problem, and we design the solution, we develop the solution, and we demonstrate the value to at the customer side. Yeah. Shell have wide range of product for industrial maintenance. Yeah. We have Shell Omala for industrial gear oil, Tellus for hydraulic, up to specialties oil such as fire-resistant oil, and also biodegradable lubricant, what we call Shell Natural, and we have more than 2,000 OEM approval and listings that showing that we have closely developed our product together with the OEMs. And specific for mineral processing plant for the nickel industries, we have a complete product portfolio from for heavy lubricant for ore mining, and also factory plant maintenance lubricant for a smelter plant. Yeah, we have all the complete product portfolio that can support the industry. Yeah. Okay, this is my last slide. Yeah, so I would say that lubricants, not all lubricants are the same. Yeah, Shell have the technology to help maximize customer profitability. That's what differentiate us. Yeah, Shell have the technology leadership. We have 3 pillars of technology leadership. The first one innovation, whereby this innovation we can develop new base oil technology, additive technology, machine testing technology that allow us to produce high quality lubricant. And we also partnering, we also have partnership with OEMs and also customer to ensure that our solution can be implemented and can resolve the challenges of the equipment and also the operation. And in terms of application, we have plenty of product application specialists across the globe that can linking between application in the field and R&D in our lubricant technology center. So we also develop services solution, to ensure that our customer, our partner is not only using the right product, but using it in the right amount, in the right time, with the right method, in the right place, and with the right competence. So they can extract more value by using the high quality lubricants. We have services such as condition monitoring, on-site services, up to digital solution. Then we will talk more about our services, I think, in the next webinar. So this is not my last slide. This is actually my last slide. Sorry. Thank you, Pak. Get back to you.
Okay, terima kasih. Thank you, Pak Zaki, for the presentations. Very interesting. With the advanced technology, quality product, innovative products and services provided by Cell Solution, I think it will be beneficial to the nickel industry in order to boosting the product to keep up with the growing demand of the nickel sector. Thank you very much, Pak Zaki, and we'll get back to you in the Q&A sessions. So, okay, before we move to the next presenters, I'd like to little bit briefly recap of what we have covered in the first three sessions. The first speakers, Mr. Nikhil Shah from CRU analyst in London, based in London. He projected in his presentation, is projected that the global stainless steel is projected to rise in the 2021. It's about 13%, and also the sales, the EV sales in China and Europe also expected to remain strong in 2021. And nickel consumptions, global consumption also expected to increase by 11 or 20%. And also there is possibility of the oversupply in the nickel market due to the strong productions from Indonesia. And the second presenter from Shanghai Metals Market, Ms. Lingying Sang, also mentioned about the drop of the inventory of in China due to the export ban from Indonesia, and also the nickel inventory domestic ports drop, and also the China NPA output also expected to drop in 2021. Okay, so we still have time to listen to the other presenters, is also with a very interesting topic. The next presenter is Mr. Christopher Gower. He's a CEO of Alpilium Group. It's a company with its mission to fueling the global transition to electric vehicles. So the company now is moving to position itself to tap in the growing EV industry, and Indonesia is, of course, will play a major part of it by having huge nickel resources. Christopher first joined the board of Direct Nickel as a non-executive director in 2011 and was appointed as CEO in 2016. He has over 25 years experiences as in-house counsel for a number of international companies. So I believe Mr. Gower is a very highly qualified lawyer indeed. So he's joining us from Jakarta. Mr. Christopher Gower, CEO of Altilium Group with the topic, the future of nickel processing technology to increase added value of nickel. 15 minutes the time for you, Mr. Gower, please.
Thank you very much, Pa. Selamat siang and good afternoon to all of the attendees. I'll just share screen. Right, and I'll turn the camera off. Right, I assume you've got that now, yes?
Yes, we got it, yeah.
Right, thank you, and thank you to PT Index Commoditas Indonesia and the Petromindo Group for this opportunity to address you. It's still a surreal experience talking to a computer screen instead of talking to a room full of people. Also like to thank the sponsors for their support. The scene that we have currently now in terms of nickel mining and nickel processing is that, as you've heard from the previous speakers, the nickel laterites are being used to produce both stainless steel and for the battery metals industry. The battery metals industry, the projected demand is really driving a lot of the cost, a little of the price at the moment of nickel, and the government of Indonesia is committed to developing the downstream industries, which that commitment began with the export ban, and it was clearly explained in the background for this webinar in the piece provided. The one issue I'd take with the background is that the statement was there that nickel is a key material in making lithium batteries. You may recall Elon Musk last year referred to the fact that lithium-ion batteries should really be called nickel-ion batteries because they are mainly nickel. And with the movement towards the 811 battery, we're seeing 80% nickel in these batteries. So I think nickel is the key metal. And has been identified as such by various governments in adding it to its strategic metals list. Right, just go to the next slide. So 2030, the UN agenda, the deadline for sustainable development. What does this mean for the battery metals industry? Well, by 2030, many governments, almost all governments, have stated that by 2030 they'll no longer be selling petrol or diesel vehicles, and the only vehicles available will be electric vehicles as new vehicles. In order to get people to purchase electric vehicles, there's an issue with price. Unfortunately, the majority of the world isn't going to be able to afford to drive Teslas, as they are a elite vehicle, and mass adoption has to be achieved by providing the range of vehicles, that we see in the petrol and diesel range now. In order to get the mass adoption of those vehicles, we need the batteries to be cheaper, because the batteries are one of the single largest cost contributors to the price of the vehicle. And in order to get cheaper batteries, we need nickel to be cheaper, because nickel is the largest cost contributor to the price of the battery. Now, unfortunately, a lot of commentators are saying that the nickel price actually needs to be higher. And you've seen the charts in the earlier presentations suggesting that the nickel price is on an upward trajectory. And if the nickel price is higher, then we have a paradox, and that is achieving mass adoption of vehicles by having low cost vehicles, whilst when the nickel price is working against that. The reason in the industry that the nickel price would, why the industry would like the nickel price to be higher, is to justify the capital investment that's required to build the plants. I won't spend too much on this. We've all seen these charts before. As you've heard, stainless steel does consume around 70% of the total nickel produced, and that is likely to increase over the coming decade as we see more urbanization in countries, particularly in Africa. So everyone is heading to Indonesia. Why? Because Indonesia is a very, or perhaps the most viable option for meeting the nickel demand that the world needs. The reserves in Indonesia, if you look at the government's figures, We have reserves of 1.4 billion, 6 billion tons to be precise. If you are looking at a cutoff grade above 1.7% nickel, and that increases to adds another 2.92% if you go below 1.7%. Of course, the bottom grade that is taken into account of these figures, I'm not able to find, but I'll come back to grades when I start talking a little bit about the process that my company has developed. This figure from the USGS shows clearly that Indonesia is the largest source of nickel in the world. The tonnages, if you take 23.7% of 88.7 million tons, you don't come out with the numbers I've just provided, but that is dependent upon where the source of the numbers. So world nickel production, Indonesia is outstripping the rest of the world. It is producing over 2 times more nickel than any other country. The issue here, though, is that nickel processing, nickel mining and nickel processing, there is an environmental cost. And whilst I can't talk about the mining, as that's not my area of expertise, in terms of the processing, it's important that we understand that nickel is being provided, nickel for the battery metal industry is produced by the hydrometallurgical industry largely. We've heard about the Tsingshan process for taking nickel pig iron and converting it to matte, but I don't think that's a viable long-term process. Hydrometallurgy is the choice, and that of course is a chemistry involving the use of acids. And there's also recently been a debate about the Deepsea Nodules, which are an alternative to laterite ore. The nodules being harvested off the ocean floor. You'll have heard, I think it was earlier this week or late last week, that BMW and a number of other motor vehicle companies came out and announced that they would not touch any metals that were sourced from those nodules. Now, the companies involved in the harvesting of those nodules have pushed back and made a comparison between the environmental impact of the harvesting of nodules versus the environmental impact of land mining. But this all goes to demonstrate the fact that there is an intense focus on the environmental impact of the production of these metals. If the world is seeking to adopt electric vehicles for the purposes of creating cleaner air and meeting climate change targets, destroying the environment at the outset in the mining and the processing of those metals would appear to be counterproductive. And I don't think that's what is intended by anybody in this industry. So as I said, hydrometallurgy is the process by which MHP is produced, mixed hydroxide product, nickel cobalt mixed hydroxide. At the moment, that process is largely produced by HPAL, and HPAL being an established technology, where plants here in Indonesia and elsewhere around the world. You've seen in earlier presentations, there are some issues with HPAL, cost overruns, failure to meet nameplate capacity. Technologically, it's a complex process, largely driven by the autoclaves that need to be developed. It operates at 400 atmospheres, it operates at around in excess of 250 degrees Celsius. So it's a challenging process. When it works, it's efficient. The one problem that HPAL has, and I know that the Indonesian government is dealing with at the moment, is the tailings. And the tailings have basically, there's 2 things you can do with the tailings. One is you can put them in a dam. So this is a picture of Coral Bay from Google Earth. There is a small processing plant down the bottom, just where the red dot saying Coral Bay Nickel Corporation is. And then there's a tailings dam, which if you use Google Earth's measuring tool, you'll find that's about 1.7 kilometers long and 1.3 kilometers wide. When tailings dams go wrong, they go wrong in a big way. And okay, this was an iron ore dam in Brazil. This was the Vale dam, which burst in January 2019. As you can see, lots of people lost their lives, and just recently Vale announced a $7 billion settlement to compensate the communities that were harmed by that. Another alternative to tailings dams is deep sea tailings placement or deep sea tailings disposal. I think placement is probably a bit of a euphemism, and disposal probably is more akin to dumping. If it goes into the sea, we don't know where it ends up, the green lobbies are clearly very opposed to deep sea tailings disposal, just as they have issues with the mining of the nodules. This is a subject which is not going to go away. I understand the Indonesian government's position is that they're not going to grant permits for deep sea tailings disposal, and which leaves them, what is the option? I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, wrong picture. And we saw at Ramu the problem with the deep sea disposal is that if something there goes wrong, again, it's rather catastrophic. One alternative for HPAL plants is they can spend another $1 to $1.5 billion and build a tailings treatment facility to enable the tailings to be dry stacked. Indonesia, of course, is in the Coral Triangle, so there's a very delicate environment here, which suggests, is obvious that Indonesia is not well suited to this, apart from the seismic activity in this area as well. As you've heard, there's an alternative, the Mpi to MAT process, which Tsingshan announced. The process, I think, is very greenhouse gas intensive. Some commentators have said it may produce localized acid rain. I don't think there is any long-term future for that process, certainly not in the green world of electric vehicles. We believe that we have an alternative, and that alternative is the D&I process. This process has been in development since about 2008. It's been waiting for the battery metals industry to develop. That's the industry that our process is most suited to. Unique features of our process is we treat limonite, saprolite, and transition zone in almost any blend. We extract all of the metals that are present in that ore. So the economics of our process are fundamentally different from the economics of any other process, because you don't just look at the value of the nickel, you look at the cobalt, the scandium, aluminium, magnesium, manganese, and very importantly, we take the iron out. And in taking the iron out and producing a hematite, we significantly reduce the volume. So our residue is about 50% of the ore, so about around 450, 500 kilograms per ton of ore processed. And that residue is able to be dry stacked and returned to the mine because we've recovered almost all the acid from the process. We use nitric acid, and the nitric acid doesn't detect stainless steel, so that means that our materials of construction are quite straightforward, 3 or 4 grade stainless steel.
Mr. Gowar, your time is 3 minutes left.
Right, okay, I will move quickly. Last week, Parburas in a presentation showed a calculation of the amount of waste that was produced for each electric vehicle. He came up with a figure of 19.5 million tons. And what he didn't add was the neutralizing agent that has to be added to the sulfuric acid rich waste, which tends to triple the amount, the volume of the tailings. The D&I process, as I've said, it's safer. We operate at atmospheric pressure. We operate at temperatures around 110 to 140 degrees. It's a simple, straightforward flow sheet, and our materials of construction are 3 or 4 grade stainless steel. We have low capex and low opex when compared to, certainly when compared to HPAL. Success stories, recent success story is Queensland Pacific Metals. They have just announced the commencement of their definitive feasibility study, which is being done by Hatch, and they are building the first commercial scale direct nickel process plant in Queensland near Townsville. You can read a lot about them on the website because they're a public company. I invite you to follow me on LinkedIn. We tell our story and we keep it updated very frequently each week. And if you'd like to follow us, you'll find me there. And with that, I'll say thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Christopher Gowar, CEO of Altilum group for a very interesting presentations. You mentioned it in your last few slides that the DNI process is safer, simpler, leaner, and of course more profitable. Yeah, so it's yeah, we will get back to you later in the Q&A sessions. Okay, the last presenter of the today webinar is Miss Susiana Ekasari. She's Associate Energy and Utilities of Oliver Wyman. Oliver Wyman is a global consultancy firm with its deep base on the deep industry experience across the oil, gas, utilities, chemicals, and mining sectors. The firm helps clients seize new trend, challenges, opportunity in energy while managing their existing businesses and asset efficiently and effectively. Topic of the Ms. Ekasari presentation is outlook of electric vehicles and rise of battery metals in 2021. We've learned, we have listened presentation from first and the two presenters today. They mentioned about EV and auto battery metal, battery EV and also battery metal. So we are going to listen the outlook of the EV and battery from Oliver Wyman, presented by Ms. Susiana Ekasari. Silakan Bu Susiana.
Waktunya, thank you.
15 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Hendra, for the introduction and for the opportunity to participate in this event. Thank you to the sponsors as well to make this webinar happen. Selamat siang semuanya, and good afternoon to all attendees. Like what Pak Hendra mentioned, today in this webinar, I've been given a mandate to share some perspective on the outlook of EV and the battery metals. So if we talk about EV, it has recently been a hot topic, not only for the car makers, but also for the infrastructure providers, including miners as well as regulators or governments. Now, if you look at the electric share of the total vehicle sales in 2020, the share is still small, but it's rising fast. So the sales in 2020 is pretty much affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the looming economic downturn resulting from it. However, as the economy gradually recovers, it is projected that by 2040, over half of all light vehicles sold will be electric. Markets like China and parts of Europe would achieve much higher penetrations, but lower adoption rate in emerging markets will basically reduce the global average here. Now, despite the rapid growth, EVs only account for just 8% of the light vehicles in 2030, although the number will also rise to 31% by 2040 as the fleet slowly change over. So these sales and the number of fleet will continue to rise, driven by these growth drivers. So first, it's the regulatory framework. It's a top-down driver to increase the pace of electrification in virtually any markets. Setting the right incentive will also drive the EV market. These two basically make up the most important driver for the EV adoption, supported with the large-scale construction of necessary infrastructure for EVs, such as charging infrastructure, reliable power grid as well. It will be required to support the adoption. Then from the perspective of technology and cost, high level of innovation leading to improvement in performance, such as energy density and cost reduction in EV batteries will be needed as well. Then lastly, there's an external market factor that would play a role in the EV uptake, such as the consumer preferences and product or service offerings for both large and small customers. Now, given the key growth drivers, basically there are two scenarios that the EV adoption will likely play out, and this can be different from one market to another. In the base case, we expect the growth to be mainly regulatory driven with some support in other dimensions, most importantly, incentive and supporting infrastructure. An example of this will be China, Germany or USA, who have seen stable growth over the past years in their EV penetration. Now, on the other end, you have country like Norway, whose government has imposed a very strict regulation regarding the ban of ICE sales with extensive incentives given to the whole ecosystem players. So the aggressive push like what Norway does is likely to result in a steep ramp up which is already proven by the high penetration of EV in the country, which is about 20 or 22% right now. In each of these cases, basically the mix of the powertrain technologies will change, and the EV powertrain will account for a significant portion of the total powertrains, especially for the passenger vehicle segment and the light commercial vehicle segment. For the passenger vehicle segment, the BEV penetration right now is still very small at about 3 to 4% and almost non-existent for the LCV and the CV. But the BEV penetration basically will increase to about 21% with the upper bound at 36%. And this is similar to the penetration in the LCV segment. As for hybrids, the range is much narrower, between 18 to 23% for PV and 14 to 22% for the LCV. The PHEV may be at a disadvantage here, given that the CO2 emissions of some PHEVs can actually be above those of ICEs in reality. One of the options that the car makers could take is potentially to increase the electric range by double the amount of the average today, but it will come at the expense of the substantially increased costs. Fuel cells here is still very low across the board, but we may likely see a steady increase in the future as hydrogen starts to take off. Now, if you look at Indonesia, there's the 2035 roadmap for electric vehicle electrification, which is part of the government plan to prohibit the sales of fossil fuel vehicles by 2040. In the roadmap, the government has set a progressive production target for both EV and e-motorcycles, e-motorbikes, from 20% in 2025 up to 30% in 2035. This translates to about 400,000 units for electric vehicles, up to 1.2 million units in 2035. The number is much higher here for the motorbikes because the target production is also much higher. Now, to support this, the government has pledged to provide a wide range of incentive to ecosystem players, from a reduction in import tariff for the vehicle itself, from the production materials, machinery, to sales tax reduction and other non-fiscal incentive. However, it will also come with the push to increase the local content to 80% for both EV and e-bikes, which is actually good for the domestic auto industry because now OEMs will be forced to invest in manufacturing facilities in Indonesia. There are some challenges, of course, which is mainly around the supporting infrastructure and the vehicle displacement rate, given the sheer number of vehicle stock in Indonesia. Now, basically, if the government targets are met, there will be about 3.5 million cars on the road, or about 9.5% share, and about 24 million e-motorcycles, or about 8% share by 2035. Even though right now the domestic production may only come online next year, we may still likely see EVs on the road from imports. There will be price barriers, of course, but it will be overcome by a set of incentive, as I mentioned before. Now, for the passenger car segment, due to the lack of production and higher prices, limited infrastructure, Indonesia may actually adopt the fully electric car regime by starting with hybrid vehicles first. But unlike the passenger car segment, the EV adoption in two-wheeler segment is likely to start from the offset instead of true hybrid. So some local manufacturers actually has already started production last year, while the other OEMs such as Honda and Yamaha have also started selling and leasing some e-motorcycles, but it's done through import routes. And as the market for EV grows, not only in Indonesia, but in the neighboring ASEAN countries, there are plenty of opportunities for Indonesia to participate in the battery supply chain. Within the region itself, Indonesia will house a significant portion of the EV market, especially from the e-bike standpoint. In terms of EV, Thailand is expected to surpass Indonesia, but overall, there's enough demand to serve in the domestic market as well as the export market. There's some challenges in the financial and operational standpoint, but given the high reserve of nickel and cobalt in Indonesia compared to ASEAN peers, as well as the large pool of workforce, cheap electricity rates, Indonesia is actually very well positioned, and it's a very favorable position to become the EV battery manufacturing hub in the region. Now, as the EV begins to replace the ICE, the strain on the battery and battery metals industry will be more pronounced. So some key trends already show that with technological advancement right now and increasing nickel content, we'll see the energy density of EV battery to increase, especially for BEV. It is less so for PHEV because there's a cost challenge here associated with the increasing battery capacity. Now, the battery cost itself appears to decline from $175 per kilowatt hour right now up to around 100 in 2025 and eventually $75 per kilowatt hour in 2030, which is also driven by technological breakthrough in major components like higher nickel cathode, silicon anode, thinner separator, and overall just improved manufacturing process. But even with the technological advancement and with current capacity addition that we see, all the production facilities here will basically need to operate in full capacity in order to meet the exponential growth of the battery demand by 2025. You see here, from here and then on, there will be continued deficit if there's no further expansion plans in production capacity. And this actually poses a significant threat to the EV market itself, because if you know right now, people already experience longer wait times after placing an order. Some automakers are pausing the production of certain models due to unavailability of certain key ingredients for the batteries as well, mainly for cobalt and to a certain extent lithium.
Oke, waktunya Bu, 3 menit. Bu Susiana.
Okay. I'll try to be quick. I think I have 3 more slides. But basically, within the lithium-ion battery market, the NCA, NMC, and LFP currently dominate the market. But in the future, the high nickel battery is likely to exhibit the highest growth, from 6% market share right now up to 35% in 2030. This is driven partly due to the reduced in cobalt content in the battery component at the back of the uncertainties in supply, as well as part of an effort to increase the energy density and reduce cost. NCA will continuously to see grow steadily because as Tesla is growing and BMW and Volkswagen are growing, it will be a growth driver there. The decrease in NMC will be driven by the decline in the use of NMC 111 and 424. But the high nickel version will continue to stay in the market basically. Meanwhile, the share of LFP likely to stay around 20% because of the demand in China. Now, what this means for the battery metals, basically, it means that the lithium demand will grow as fast as the EV battery demand by about a factor of 11 from current global demand. And aligned with the increase in demand, the share of EV demand will also rise as well. Right now, lithium demand makes up for about 35% of total lithium demand, but the share will increase significantly in the future. It's the same for nickel and cobalt here, although the growth will be in a lower magnitude by a factor of 2 to 3 from the current global demand. But the total share of EV demand will also increase from the level right now at 3% and 22% to about like 40 to 60% in the future. Now, what this means in terms of if we look at the global supply and demand balance, the lithium market is still well supplied up to 2025, but nickel and cobalt may experience a shortage or will face different side of issues compared to lithium by 2025. So basically, due to the uncertainties in supply, especially for cobalt, there will be a higher shortage in the future. Now, what it means for the Indonesian players or new entrants, basically, even though there are some challenges in the supply side, this also creates some opportunities for new players and entrants due to the source of supply, the concentration of supply, and the quality of supply. For the lithium market, there may be limited opportunities in both the upstream and midstream and downstream opportunities. But for nickel and cobalt, we see a tremendous opportunities given the lack of supply right now. And I think just to end the slide here, basically there are certain risks as well associated with the participation in the EV battery supply chain. First is from the capital standpoint, it is capital intensive, and currently investment in EV and battery manufacturing facilities actually outpace the investment in battery metals. So more investment is needed to convert the resources into reserves and refined products, but the miners need to work together with the current battery makers to ensure the security of supply and minimize the risk in the market. Now, secondly, even though there are enough reserves, there's a concern about the ability for domestic players to ramp up the production and refining capacity. Given the fragmented market, I think only a handful number of players right now have the proven capabilities in the battery metals and battery production, meaning the execution risk is high. So to overcome this, the players also need to partner or come up with business models that would allow some technological and knowledge transfer. And there is another risk in the alternative fuels or battery technologies here. So there are next generation batteries such as lithium sulfur and solid state coming in the latter part of the decade. And the production process for this batteries differs from conventional lithium ion cells. So it would be a potential problem for a new plant which only focus on the conventional lithium ion battery. So basically with all this coming to play, there needs to be a strong collaboration between the OEMs, the miners, the financial institutions, and battery suppliers to create a sustainable, ethical, and transparent supply chain of the raw materials. This kind of collaboration not only can be used to enhance battery recycling methods, but basically also to build up strategic reserves in order to ensure the stable supply of battery metals. I think with this, I would end my presentation here. I hope the information shared was insightful, and thank you again for the chance to share some of our perspective in this webinar. Over to you, Pak Hendra.
Okay, thank you, Bu Susiana Ekasari, Associate Energy and Utilities of Oliver Wyman for the presentations. Very informative, very insightful, Bu Susiana Ekasari. There are some key points that you raised in the presentation, that basically Indonesia in the favorable positions to supply this strong EV battery growth. The government in fact has already issued some regulations, incentive also, and also the infrastructures, but there are some challenges of course in the sector of infrastructure that still need to be updated. And also you mentioned about the collaborations on the EV ecosystem, and I heard that Indonesian government has set up the first holding in a state-owned enterprise BUMN and the holding battery, which is collaboration of the 4 Indonesian BUMNs, seperti Antam, Pertamina, PLN, among others. Thank you very much. I will get back to you. I believe there are some interesting questions to be raised by the participants. Okay, before we move to Pak Ramli Ahmad, I'm really sorry, I just got the message here that one of our speakers will have to leave the forum very soon. So I'll give a couple of minutes to Pak Zaki to respond to one question from the audience here, asking about the, let's see. Yeah, Pak Zaki, are you still with us? Hello? Hello, Pak Adianto, Pak Zaki is still there? Hello.
Yes, Pak.
Pak Zaki?
Hello, Pak Zaki.
Yeah, okay. Pak Zaki from Shell Indonesia, there is a question from the audience asking about the beside the technical value, technical benefit of the Shell product, is there any sustainability value when the use of lubricant products? Pak Zaki, can you respond it right away, Pak? Hello.
Pak Chris.
Oh, maybe Pak Chris
maybe.
Shell. Okay, we'll get back to Pak Chris later.
Yeah.
Okay, Pak Ramli ya. Sorry Pak Ramli to keep you waiting. It's supposed to be your turn. Pak Ramli Ahmad, our good friend, is director of PT Virema Impacts, a bulk commodity trading and investment company. Pak Ramli has over 20 years experience in the commodity and bulk trading in the regions. Pak Ramli, you've listened to great presentations from our speakers earlier, and I believe you have some, thought or opinion, a point of view, or you want to clarify or commenting on some of the key points made by the earlier presenters. Pak Ramli, please.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Indra, for the introduction. Yes, actually, basically, I started off with coal, as you're very well aware of. After 30 years of coal, now it seems that the prospect of nickel is so good that I cannot help but to be part of it. First of all, why did we make this shift from coal into nickel? We personally think that the future for nickel is very bright. Whereas there are people who are saying that the coal is already coming into a sunset industry. Let's not discuss about coal. Let's discuss about nickel here. You see, we have get a lot of government support. The government is is going all the way out to support the nickel industry. They are setting up IBC, for example, the Indonesian Battery Corporation. And then we are also one of the biggest producers of nickel in the world. Actually, right now we are the biggest producer. Yeah? And if you have seen that there are now we have 25 operating smelters in Indonesia, and 37 more is actually in construction. What does that go to show? And I think China has come in a very big way into this industry, thus helping us. And I only see a lot of benefits to Indonesia as a country in a whole for now, because first of all, the government has already stopped the exports of nickel ore, which means that only downstream works or downstream process has to be done in Indonesia. And I think this is good because right now we are getting a lot more foreign exchange in terms of the export of nickel. We are able to increase the value of nickel, which is actually in line with what the Indonesian government wants to do. And together with this, the development of lithium battery, the development of electric cars, electric vehicles, all I can say is that we can see another boomtown Charlie coming soon. But of course, not only look on the bright side, but there's also other things that we have to take care. Like, for example, the resolution of tailing disposal that has to be resolved properly and quickly before it gets out of hand, before anybody gets hurt, before the environments get affected. This is very important because this is our future. If we don't take care of these little things, our future will not be, will be very, very much affected, right? And for that, for now, we have to keep on monitoring. We have to do monitor the environment, pretty strictly to see how is the effect in the long run.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ramli. Sounds like you have a very exciting, you see very exciting prospect in the future. You've been in the country for more than 2 decades. You've seen the evolution of the policy regulation, the growth and fall of the industry, and now you see nickel is a highly potential as Indonesia as the biggest deposits in the world, and also the support from the regulatory, the infrastructures, and also the ecosystem of the industry to support growth. Yeah, so it's very exciting. Okay, I'll get back to you later, Pak.
Just to add on a little regarding the legal aspect.
Yes.
Sorry,
okay.
The legal aspect. I hope the government can be more transparent on the legal aspect and very clear on the rules and regulations. Please do not repeat of what we has done within the coal industry, whereby there are many regulations that are not clear up to today. So now that we are starting this new industry, not really new actually, but we are moving very fast to this industry. Please, and there are many foreign investors also involved. It is always good to be very clear on our laws. Sorry, Pak, that's all I need to add.
Okay, I see. Thank you, Pak Ramli. You brought this up because there are a couple of questions that may be related to the one that you have just raised. Okay, to the panelists, we have some questions from the audience. I'll take a question from Pak Beni Hutahayan. Yeah, this is the question is actually addressed to Nikhil, but I also like to take the opportunity to ask to give to Bu Susiana also to add it later on. Okay, the question is to Mr. Nikhil Shah. Question is what the Indonesian government should do to develop Indonesia's sustainable nickel industry and integrate it toward battery supplier that can benefit Indonesia economic. So please, Nikhil, and also later on Susiana to respond.
Hi, thanks very much. Well, I think sustainability, ESG has become a very important factor, especially following COVID, and we've seen many governments move towards green policies. And I think if you look at sort of what sort of other countries have sort of the route they followed, for example, the European Union, they've got the emission trading scheme, for example, and along that we have the cap and trade system, for example, to reduce CO2 emissions. So there are examples out there. And I think one fact I should have mentioned in my presentation was that, the drive towards EVs has also been driven by regulation, within the European Union. So I think there are examples out there in terms of moving towards a more sustainable industry. I think, the ETS system, for example, in European is a good example of, how, other countries could potentially follow as well.
Okay, thank you, Nikhil. Bu Susiana, you want to add on the questions?
Yeah, I think it would really depend on the incentive from the government and basically how serious the government is in pushing the OEMs to start, constructing the manufacturing facilities in Indonesia. I see a question as well from Pak Beni around how realistic it is, the roadmap of Indonesia EV development, given the tough competition from fuel. That's true. That's why it would really be driven by the incentive, the infrastructure, which is basically the charging infrastructure and so on and so forth. But I think one thing as well is that the total cost of ownership for the EV is basically high right now compared to the fossil fuel vehicle. So there needs to be a certain business models by the battery manufacturer or the battery providers that would allow the Indonesian consumers to basically, start buying the EVs. For example, maybe some model like the battery as a service, which takes out the battery price of the cost of the EV, for example. Then the battery provider can sell it as a service. Basically, the people can rent or lease the battery and then come back when it needs supply and pay based on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Okay. Thank you, Bu Susiana. So
yeah.
Back to sustainability issue, we get the questions asking about the value or sustainable value of the Shell lubricant products. Is there somebody from Shell could respond to the questions? Siapa ya?
Sorry, Pak Hendra. So Pak Jaki has already left due to he has already have another meeting. So let me try to answer that question. So in regards of the lubrications, yes. Can you hear me, Pak Hendra?
Yes, it's clear for me.
Okay, yeah. So in regards of lubrications, we believe that lubricants only take 2% of the maintenance cost actually. But somehow when we're talking about the maintenance process, people only looking at the cost of the lubricant itself rather than end-to-end process. If you try to have the synthetic oil, the benefit not only in terms of the cost actually, because when you're using the synthetic oil, it can have a longer ODI or what you call ODI, oil drain interval, so you can use the oil make longer, and also for the maintenance effectivity, it can bring to the 10 until 30% more efficient rather than using the base oil that is not synthetic. So we believe that if the customer would like to have the synthetic products, it can bring a lot of benefits rather than more expensive itself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Chris Natala of Shell Indonesia for the response. Okay, Mr. Gower. Yeah, okay. Mr. Ramli Ahmad mentioned about the suggestion, the suggestion that Indonesian government should clarify, make the regulation is clear, so in order to boost the nickel potential in Indonesia. And we consider you as investor, decided to move to Indonesia to see the potential growth in the nickel industry. How do you see so far from your perspective on the policy and regulatory of investing in nickel industry in Indonesia from technology providers' perspective?
Yeah, no, thanks, Pa. I think the first thing the government did, which was a very good move, was the export ban. The export ban means that Indonesia holds on to its resource, and economically, the processing of ore should occur as close to the mine as possible. It doesn't make sense to ship ore away from a mine. You utilize, in some cases, 2% of the ore and then have 98% of the ore as waste. So processing should take place next to the mine, and therefore processing should develop in Indonesia as a result of the export ban. For processes like HPAL and ours, we're producing an intermediate product, the MHP, which then needs to be refined into sulfates. It also then makes sense for those refineries to be built as back ends to the MHP producing plants. Now, they don't need to be immediately adjacent to, but they could well be. And then, of course, once you have your sulfates, you go to your cathodes and then into your batteries. I think one of the problems is that we have, between mine and vehicle, we have quite an extended supply chain. And it's looking at that supply chain and establishing what is the most efficient and economic way to integrate that supply chain. I think, from my perspective, and I maybe have rose-tinted glasses at the moment. I've only been here 6 weeks. Everything has gone very smoothly for me. I'm impressed with much of what I've seen. This wasn't my first visit to Indonesia, but it is my first move here. Indonesia has an educated community. It has significantly lower wage costs than Australia, where we have our pilot plant located. I think Indonesia has a lot going for it. I think the environmental issues are a driver. So the government does have to, I know that I'm not telling them anything they don't already know. It's something they have to focus on. I think that the European and North American motor vehicle manufacturers are going to be looking at the audit trail of the battery metals to see what the environmental impact of those metals has been. And that's, that is something which is going to develop as this industry grows.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gower. Now, Ms. Ling Ying Zhang. Okay, there's a question from Mahendra Sulistyo. How long do you think the nickel...
She has a meeting, Pak.
Oh, yeah.
She already left the meeting, Pak.
Oh, they left. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, Mr. Nikhil Shah, are you still there, Mr. Shah? Okay, so...
Yes, I'm still here, yeah.
Answer this, nickel, and followed by Bu Sosiana. How long do you think the nickel demand will be in the stable performance? Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by stable performance, but as I said in my presentation, I mean, there is a strong rebound in nickel demand this year from stainless and the EV sector. So we're looking at nickel demand rising by over 10% this year, after falling by 2 to 3% last year. So we are seeing a strong rebound. Of course, then we do expect the growth to remain, I would say, relatively strong still. I think we're looking at growth of around sort of at least 4 to 5% over the medium term. So, I think that growth is still, and if you look at sort of historically, that's still very strong growth for nickel demand, as we see, increasing demand from the battery sector, especially. I think that's going to be a key driver for nickel demand growth over the next few years, along with the stainless sector.
Okay, thank you, Nikhil. Bu Susiana.
Yeah, but I think I agree with Pak Nikhil here that it would depend on the stability of demand in the EV batteries, and of course the stability of demand in the stainless steel, which is the incumbent or the right now it basically the highest demand for nickel. So as we see the companies OEMs like Tesla, BMW to increase their production and steadily into the future, we should see that the growing demand for nickel will just continue to rise in the future. I would say in the short to medium term, we will already see the effect from the EV battery market. But beyond 2025, I think there should be a higher growth for nickel from the EV perspective, at least.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ramli. As a trader, how do you you feel in the in the market, yeah, among your colleagues in the traders about the exciting demands, or how they see, yeah, from players?
Well, I made a couple of trips to Sulawesi myself to see what is happening on the ground. Well, actually, there's a lot of activities that's going on. I went there in December, and I was there again in March this year. Well, the activities were simply going on. There's a lot of mining activities going on. There's a lot of budging activities going on. And when you ask around, yeah, everybody is busy, busy doing loading, doing mining, So, and you can see as you move around the towns locally, you can see that there's economic growth. Especially very near to the smelters like BDNI, or near to in Morowali, in IMIP, area and all this. You'll find that there's a lot of local economic activity, and it's good, because they have actually created a lot of employment. They have things have changed. You will find that there's rows and rows of houses available for rental, which we call kos-kosan, over here. For the employees to stay. So things have been different. On the other hand, there are also more and more people are coming in to do mining, and there are many more barge players that are coming in to do the transportation, and as well as even recently we heard that there's a shortage of trucks actually to that extent. So all this has actually created a lot of economic activity. And it's still going on, and we foresee that many new areas are also being opened. We have been offered concessions to operate on, and we are studying the possibilities.
Okay, thank you, Pak Ramli. That's a question from Pak Keith with Church to Mr. Jawara. The question from Keith is, what do you think the performance of the HPAL plant in Indonesia, which has been built in following Ramu design, going to be special in terms of reaching nameplate capacity?
I'm reluctant to answer that because I'm not an HPAL expert. I can only look at the history of HPAL plants and see the issues that have arisen in their development. But I'm not anti-HPAL by any means, because I very firmly believe in competition, and competition in this market is what is going to make the processes better and more efficient, and also drive the price of nickel down so that we can see the mass adoption of electric vehicles.
Okay, thank you, Chris. To Nikhil, yeah. Question from Putra. Pak Putra Selamat Abadi. Could you please elaborate more on NPI conversion to sulfate for the battery sector?
Hi. Tsingshan made the announcement to start producing nickel matte at some of the MPI capacity in Indonesia. So the process, I mean, it's not a new process. I mean, there are, for example, other like Doni Ambo in New Caledonia used to use or to produce matte, and then Sarawak, for example, is a good example where matte is produced. So you do need to add a converter to the facility, and then I think ideally I think the matte would be shipped to China to produce nickel sulfate, where you probably would need a POX refinery, a pressure oxidation leaching refinery. So that would be the process in terms of going from MPI to matte. But like I said, I mean, there's still a question mark on the timing, I would say, from talking to people in the market. But yeah, that generally is the expectation for production to start from sort of Q4 this year.
Okay, thank you, Nikhil. Pak Adianto, we're running out of time, but I want to ask your permission for additional 5 minutes. Yeah, we still have some questions that we need to respond the question from the audience. Okay, I'll take the last 2 or 3 questions to be responded by the panelists. Okay, ini Pak dari Pak Arya Somalia. Indonesia has a huge nickel resource and rank as a number 4 in the world. What do you perspective Indonesia resources value if we take into consideration transportation, logistic, easy to do business? So Bu Susiana and Pak Ramli maybe would like to give some comment or opinion as a trader, ya Pak Ramli. So Bu Susiana first.
Sorry, Pak, what was the question again?
Yeah, the question from Pak Arya Somalia. Indonesia has a huge nickel resources. What is the perspective on Indonesia resources value if we take into consideration the transportation logistics?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Mr. Christopher has said before. It depends on how far is the smelter or refining facility is from the source of the metals, right? Because you want it to be as close as possible to minimize the transportation and logistic cost. Whether it's going to be easy to do business in Indonesia, or that's a question mark. I don't have capacity to answer that. But in terms of the resource value with the transport and logistic consideration, I think from the transport side, if we export, there may be higher costs associated with that. But I think for the production cost itself, it can be minimized as long as you place the location of the smelters or refining facilities strategically close to the resources itself.
Thank you, Bu Susiana. Pak Ramli, you may add on it. You still muted, Pak Ramli? Hello, sorry.
I'm sorry. Yeah. If you are talking about the logistics and the transportation aspect for this business in the nickel business, well, I must say that there is always an opportunity. As I said earlier, there's already a shortage of trucks. This is from our ground observations. Yeah. There's already a shortage of trucks, so there is a requirement for such. And on top of that, there's also requirement for budgets to help the transportation, because you know that the location of the mines and the location of the smelters are way apart, and there'll be a need of for transportation to be used. Yeah. And well, the opportunity is there. Of course, you have to be competitive as in any other business. You should just try to look into it, yeah, and try to expand into this.
Thank you, Pak Ramli. Okay, this is the last 2 questions. First, I'd like to address to Mr. Christopher Gower. Okay, this is the question from Pak Donil. Yeah, he asking about why significant investment in nickel smelter Indonesia are mostly contributed by Chinese investor. Why European countries not keen to follow China's step?
I think that's a very good question. I saw that, and it goes right to the point. European companies should be investing in Indonesia. I think we've seen a move towards that driven from Asia with LG Chem's announcement that they intend to invest $9.8 billion in developing battery metal industry here. I have no further information on exactly where that's going to be directed. But no, it's a good point. The European companies, as you know, are looking to develop battery manufacturing plants in Europe and in the UK. And but that's the last piece of the puzzle before it goes into the car. The processing of the ore, the refining, and the cathode could easily be done here. And look, I intend to play my part and try and get those companies interested in developing operations out here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jawara. So this is the last questions, from Pak Agus Supriyadi. I'd like to address to Mr. Nickel Shah, still related to the European, So we have heard that Europeans, about the European Union, there is a complaint made by European Union to the dispute settlement body of the WTO of Indonesian's export ban. So the question from Pak Agus, what and how big is the impact of Indonesian nickel ore export ban to Europe stainless steel industry?
Well, I mean, the ore ban, which was introduced at the start of 2020, I mean, that really impacted the the supply to the Chinese MPI sector. And as you saw in my presentation, we have seen Chinese MPI production rates declining. So from the high we saw production in 2018. Now, to be honest, I mean, if you look at the global picture, although the Indonesian ore ban came into place, the impact was slightly different from what we saw when the ore ban came in place back in 2014, because this time round we did have a lot of Indonesian smelting capacity that had been built, and there was a lot of expansion which was taking place. So overall, although the ore ban did come into place and we did see a decline in Chinese MPI, the decline in Chinese MPI was more than offset by increasing production in Indonesia. So on a market basis, the global MPI production actually rose last year due to more capacity in Indonesia. So I think the ore ban, has not had a big impact as it did last time round. I mean, for the European stainless steel producers, I think what they've really benefited from is the, as we've seen with some of the other countries, is the move towards import tariffs to, help the domestic producers. And I think that's really, along with the recovering demand, that's really helped a lot of the European stainless producers in terms of production recovery into this year.
Thank you, Nickel Shah. Okay, sorry, one last question, very last one, This is a very interesting question from Mr. Ian Wolf. So I'd like Bu Susiana and Pak Ramli to very quick to respond to these questions. Will Indonesian government have issued to increase electricity generation to match the predicted growth of in EV? Susiana, very quick. And
it's a very good question. It's a valid point. Basically, I think it will put a stress to PLN as the utility provider, especially if we aim to have so many millions of EVs and e-motorcycles in Indonesia. The increase in electricity is ranging in the units of the gigawatt, in that range. So what would be useful, I think, for the utility providers here, like PLN, is to basically, kind of like do the demand rebalancing, maybe apply some sort of kind of like charging only during off-peak hours. So even though the smart or the EV is plugged into battery, it would only allow the EV to be charged when the demand start to taper off. So that kind of method can be used by PLN if they're facing a shortage in terms of electricity generation. So in that case, the PLN can also get more use out of the power plants that they currently run only during the limited peak times.
Thank you, Bu Susiana. Pak Ramli, you've been in the coal industry, so I think you can answer, give comment.
Well, actually, it's quite a little bit more technical than I expected, But nonetheless, maybe PLN should do really an allocated more small charging ports or charging stations, which is only will cater to this kind of charging 24/7. Then only you can control. Otherwise, like what Ibu Eka says, yes, it has to be controlled only during a certain off-peak hours for the purpose of charging. But I suppose when you have millions of motorbikes, yeah, you cannot expect everybody to wait to the off-peak hour. Still, some will still need to be charged during the on-peak hours. And how do we solve that? Then I think that something that PLN has to really look into it very seriously.
Thank you, Pak Ramli. So we're running out of time. I'll be back to Bu Desi as a host to close the event. Thank you very much, all the panelists, for the very great discussions. Bu Desi, please.
Thank you, Pak Hendra. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this webinar, Global Nickel Outlook and Challenges. Thank you for staying with us. And please be informed that next week, next Thursday, April 15, we will have the third series of nickel webinar with topic investment opportunities on nickel projects. You may book your space and register now. All right, thank you very much for joining today's webinar. We hope all of you obtain a very fruitful information from all our excellent speakers. Thank you very much to all speakers, panelists, and moderator who have made your valuable time to be here today. We appreciate it so much. Pak Hendra, Pak Ramli, Mr. Christopher Gower, Mr. Nikhil Shah, thank you very much. And Pak Christian, thank you. Also, once again, on behalf of the organizing committee,
Ibu
we would
Susiana.
Oh, Ibu Susiana still here. Thank you, Ibu Eka.
Yeah.
Yes, and once again, on behalf of the organizing committee, we would like to deeply thank to our main sponsor on this event, PT Shell Indonesia. Thank you, Shell, and also to our partner sponsor, PT Chakra, Jawara, IVECO. We're looking forward to see you again next week. I'm signing off. Bye.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.